They say you can't trust a rich man with secrets, but when I walked into that mansion on the worst night of my career, blood on the marble floors and a terrified billionaire holding a gun, I had no idea I was about to break every rule I'd ever lived by. Some cases change your life. This one changed everything. Before we dive into this story, if you love real-life drama, unexpected romance, and stories that make you believe in second chances, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Now, let me take you back to the night that changed everything. My name is Tasha Williams. I'm a homicide detective, and I've been doing this job for almost 10 years now. I grew up on the South Side, in a neighborhood where cops were either heroes or enemies, depending on who you asked. When my little sister got caught in crossfire at 15, I decided which side I wanted to be on. I worked my way through community college, then the police academy, and clawed my way up to detective. I earned every single step, and I didn't trust anyone who hadn't done the same, especially rich people. In my experience, money bought lawyers, not character. So when I got that call on a Friday night in October, telling me there was a body at the Westwood estate, my first thought was, here we go again. Another wealthy person thinking they can buy their way out of murder. I was exhausted. I'd just closed a double homicide case that had taken everything out of me. My partner Rodriguez had gone home to his kids, and I was about to do the same when dispatch patched through the call. Possible homicide at one of the biggest mansions in the city. The billionaire himself had called it in. Logan Pierce. I'd heard the name before. Real estate developer, owned half the downtown skyline, one of those guys whose face showed up in business magazines. I drove out there alone, which probably wasn't protocol, but backup was 20 minutes behind me. The gates opened automatically as I pulled up, and I remember thinking, of course they do. Everything's automatic when you're that rich. The mansion was like something out of a movie. All glass and white stone lit up against the night sky like a palace. It made me uncomfortable. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with my mom and sister. This was a different planet. Logan Pierce met me at the door, and he wasn't what I expected. He looked terrified. His shirt was untucked, there was sweat on his forehead, and his hands were shaking. He was holding a gun, which immediately put me on alert, but when I told him to put it down, he did it without argument. No entitlement, no demands, just fear. He led me to his study, and that's where I saw the body. His business partner, a man named Thomas Grant, dead on the floor. Single gunshot wound to the chest. Logan told me he'd found him like this, that he'd heard the gunshot from upstairs and came running. The gun was on the floor next to the body. Logan said he'd picked it up without thinking, then realized his mistake and called the police immediately. I interrogated him right there, hard questions, looking for holes in his story. But he answered everything. He didn't lawyer up, didn't make demands, didn't act like he was above this. He just kept saying, I didn't do this. Please, you have to believe me. Thomas was my friend. And the thing that got me, the thing I couldn't shake, was that he seemed genuine. His fear wasn't the fear of getting caught. It was the fear of someone who'd just lost a friend and didn't understand why. Backup arrived, crime scene techs processed everything, and the evidence started to tell a story. Forced entry through a side door, signs of a struggle. The gun wasn't registered to Logan or Thomas. It was a throwaway piece, the kind criminals use. And when we ran Thomas's financials, red flags everywhere. Gambling debts, cash withdrawals, connections to some very dangerous people. Logan sat in his living room while we worked, and he insisted on talking only to me. He said there was something about me that made him feel like I'd actually listen. He told me that Thomas had been acting strange for weeks, nervous, looking over his shoulder. There had been threatening phone calls to the office. Thomas had brushed them off, but Logan had been worried. He should have pushed harder, he said. Maybe his friend would still be alive. I should have kept my distance. I should have stayed cold and professional. But something in his voice got to me. He wasn't performing grief. He was living it. And when he looked at me with those tired eyes and said, "I know you probably think I'm just another rich guy who thinks he can buy his way out of trouble, but I swear to you I just want to know who killed my friend," I felt my walls crack just a little. The investigation moved fast. We discovered that Thomas had gotten involved with an organized crime syndicate, borrowing money he couldn't pay back. They thought he'd hidden cash somewhere, and they wanted it. Now they thought Logan knew where it was. My captain made the call. Logan needed protection. Someone had to stay with him until we caught the people responsible. I volunteered. I told myself it was just because I knew the case, because I wanted to see it through. But if I'm being honest, there was something else. Something I didn't want to admit. So I moved into the mansion. Me with my one duffel bag of clothes, living in a guest room that was bigger than my entire apartment. It felt wrong. I didn't belong there. But Logan made it easier than I expected. He didn't treat me like the help. He asked if I was comfortable, made sure I had everything I needed. He cooked dinner that first night, said he couldn't stand the idea of eating alone in that big house. We sat in his kitchen, which was fancier than any restaurant I'd ever been to, and we talked. He told me about his wife. She'd died 3 years ago from cancer, and he'd buried himself in work ever since. The mansion felt empty without her, he said. All the money in the world couldn't fill that kind of emptiness. And I heard myself telling him about my sister, about how losing her had pushed me into this career, how I'd spent 10 years trying to make sense of senseless violence. We were both lonely people, I realized, both hiding behind our work, afraid to feel too much. The next few days blurred together. We worked the case side by side. Logan had access to Thomas's business records, knew the players involved, understood the money trail in ways I couldn't. He was smart, sharper than I'd given him credit for. We made a good team, and in those quiet moments when he'd bring me coffee at 3 in the morning because he knew I was still working, or when I'd catch him watching me with this soft look on his face, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Dangerous, terrifying hope. My colleagues started giving me looks. They thought I was getting too close to a potential suspect, even though evidence was clearing him more every day. But I didn't care what they thought. For the first time in my career, I was bending my own rules, and it scared me. Then came the night everything changed. I was asleep in the guest room when I heard glass breaking. My training kicked in instantly. I grabbed my gun and went into the hallway, and that's when I saw them. 2 men armed moving through the house. They were looking for Logan. I took down the first one in the hallway. The second one came at me, and we fought. I'd been in fights before, but this was different. This was life or death, and I had someone to protect. I managed to shoot him in the shoulder, and that's when Logan appeared, pulling me toward the panic room. We sealed ourselves inside, pressed together in the dark, waiting for backup. My heart was pounding, adrenaline screaming through my veins. Logan's arm was around me and I could feel him shaking. He whispered, "You saved my life." And I whispered back, "That's my job." But it wasn't just my job anymore, and we both knew it. In that darkness, with danger just outside the door, he said, "Tasha, I'm falling for you. I know this is crazy. I know the timing is terrible. But I can't pretend anymore. You're the bravest, most incredible person I've ever met." I wanted to kiss him. God, I wanted to. But I pushed him away when backup arrived. I told him it wasn't real, that danger makes people feel things that aren't there. But I was lying. I felt it too, and it terrified me. After the attack, Logan told me he loved me, actually said the words, and I shut him down. I told him we were from different worlds, that what he felt was gratitude, not love. I told him that girls like me don't get fairy tale endings with billionaires. That's not how the world works. He looked at me with so much pain and said, "This isn't about money, Tasha. This is about you and me. 2 people who understand loss and loneliness and are brave enough to try again." But I walked away. I threw myself back into the case because that was safer than feeling. And then I found it. The missing piece. Thomas wasn't just a victim. He'd been embezzling from the company, planning to fake his death and disappear. But he'd gotten involved with real criminals who didn't appreciate being used. The money was hidden in a storage unit across town. I knew the criminals would make one more play, one final attempt to get what they wanted. And Logan was still their target. I raced back to the mansion and found him packing a bag. He was planning to disappear, to leave town so I wouldn't be in danger anymore. He said he'd rather lose everything than watch me get hurt because of him. That's when I finally understood. This wasn't about his money or my job or our different worlds. This was about two broken people finding each other in the darkness and deciding to be brave. I told him I was scared. I told him I'd been running from my feelings because I'd been taught that people like me don't get to have this kind of love. But he made me want to believe. We kissed, finally, and it felt like coming home. The final confrontation happened 2 days later. I led the operation, and Logan insisted on being there. I trusted him by then, completely. We caught the criminals at the storage unit, and there was a shootout. Logan saved my life when one of them got behind me, and I saved his when another came through the door. We worked together like we'd been partners for years. The case closed. Thomas's body was found, the criminals arrested, justice served. There was a media circus, but Logan protected my privacy, kept my name out of it as much as he could. My captain offered me a promotion, and my colleagues finally respected the work I'd done. But all I could think about was what came next. Could we really make this work? A detective and a billionaire? It sounded like a bad romance novel. 6 months later, I can tell you it's not perfect. I still live in my apartment because I need my independence. He comes over, squeezes into my tiny kitchen, meets my friends from the neighborhood. I go to his charity events, but I do it on my terms, wearing what I want, being exactly who I am. We found our balance. 2 different worlds, 1 real love. He saw past my walls and my fear. I saw past his money and his grief. And we chose each other every single day. That's what love is. Not some fairy tale where everything's easy. It's choosing someone even when it's hard, even when it doesn't make sense to anyone else. So that's my story. The case that was supposed to be just another night at work became the night I learned that love doesn't care about the walls we build or the worlds we come from. If this story touched you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that unexpected love is possible. Drop a comment telling me, have you ever found love in the most unexpected place? I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe because I've got more real stories coming your way. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never saw coming.